I have found in my travels that it lightens people up. It opens people up so they can hear what you're saying. And that and food opens people up too. Like if you sit around and we're eating and talking, for some reason a bunch of these walls come down and now we're sharing and we're breaking bread or whatever, what Jesus was saying. There's some broken down walls when you're eating together. And it's the same thing with comedy. If you're laughing, if you can make somebody laugh, those walls break down. They just come right down. Yeah. And it's a wonderful tool to use to let people open their ears.
Welcome to episode 31 of the Bishop on a Bike podcast. I am Jim Hazelwood. This episode, we are having a conversation with Poppy Champlin, comedian, screenwriter, producer. She's also the instructor of a 6-week intensive course on stand-up comedy, which is where we met. Now, she guided me and a small group of other folks through the process of learning how to assemble an 8-minute stand-up comedy monologue. And it was intense, challenging, and rewarding. So this is something I have wanted to do for 40 years, but was frankly just afraid. And now I'm realizing that fear and creativity go together. I'm also getting to the point in my life where I don't care what other people think of me, or at least not as much as I used to. Anyway, so I sat down with Poppy. I took the class, by the way, and did the performance in December. In the show notes, I'll post a link to the YouTube show. You can look at that if you wish. Anyway, I sat down with Poppy about a week ago. Or so, and we talked about her approach to comedy, as well as the use of humor in public speaking and particularly in preaching. Now, before we get to that conversation, I want to give you a couple of updates. First off, the book, Everyday Spirituality, Ways to Discover Your Life of Hope and Promise. I'm clearly not sure on that subtitle. Still working on that. Anyway, the drafts are to the editor, and she is now starting the work of tearing apart my writing and sending it back to me for a first round revisions. If you're interested in reading the first 2 chapters as we're in the process and maybe making some suggestions, just send me an email and I'll send them off to you. Just send me an email to bishop@nesynod.org, nesynod.org. I am hoping this book will be released this summer. Don't have an exact date yet, likely late July, maybe early August. I want to thank the hundreds of people that sent me their stories, their vignettes, their opinions. I received greater response to this request than anything else I have done in recent years. And the stuff you have sent is amazing. It is profound, powerful, obviously some of it very personal, some of it funny, and you have been very generous, and I really appreciate that. Obviously, I am not able to include nearly 250 stories and vignettes in this book, but I'm really grateful. Now, so this is a book that challenges the idea that we have spiritual things over here, like hold out one hand, one direction, like going to church, reading the Bible, saying prayers, and then over here on the other side, hold up your other hand, on the opposite side, we have stuff that we do like we cook, we walk, we laugh. And the book says, no, those things are not separate. When you are cooking, you are practicing spirituality. When you are walking, you are engaged with the sacred. When you are laughing, you are living in the spirit of the great saints of all time. Now, I think it's going to be a good book, a really good book, a terrific book. And I'm hoping that it will really help people that struggle with, how am I spiritual? Or I don't feel like I'm spiritual enough, or I'm not or I'm not in good graces with God or something like that. I'm really hoping it's a gift of grace in and of itself. Anyway, so if you want a glimpse or even make some suggestions, just let me know, and I'll get you those first couple chapters. Second thing I want you to know is that you may have already noticed that I have updated my website. I've merged my websites into one website, so now bishoponabike.com and jameshazelwood.net. .com was already taken by somebody. I don't know who. Anyway, they are one. So jameshazelwood.net or bishoponabike.com, either one, you put those in, it takes you the same place. That's where this podcast and all of everything else is located. I cleaned it up, tried to make it easier, simpler. And with that, I'm also committed to writing in the blog at least once a week and in more substantive ways rather than quick little pieces. I just wrote something on my fasting from social media that's on the blog that explains a little bit behind that. I think that's it. As always, I'm grateful to the Mission Investment Fund of the ELCA, particularly Jerry Lauro, and their generosity for sponsoring this podcast. Takes care of a lot of the mechanics and stuff like that. So now let's get to our conversation, which is why we're here with Poppy Champlin. You and I met because I did something I've wanted to do for 40 years.
Yeah, that was very brave of you. I mean, anybody who takes the class is very brave.
It's a real, we'll get into that in a second, but I mean, it's a real exposure of who you are in a very vulnerable way. That was one of the most surprising things about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, well, I remember the first class you said, so comedy is really, bring your life. Mm-hmm. So I write up all this stuff. It's my life. I'm bringing my life the following week. And I remember presenting, parts of it. And you were like, yeah, that's not funny. Okay. Oh. I would come back from the class and very quiet, go upstairs, and immediately start working at editing. Lisa would be, what's wrong? And I said, this is a very sobering experience.
Well, you were really good. I mean, I got to say, you probably have been one of the best students, with the amount of work that you put into it and the rigorous and the consistency that you had every time. You came back and you rewrote it, and you came back and you added and rewrote and added, and you built it to, and the editing is so much a part of it, and so you did a really good job.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. You were a great teacher.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Very good teacher. So you went to URI, University of Rhode Island, and majored in theater.
Majored in theater. Well, I actually started in basketball. I played basketball for the first 2 years.
Okay.
And loved that. But Title IX shows how old I am, but there was no women's basketball teams. There was no league, there was no nothing. So I had to figure out what else I was going to try and do to make money. And theater, I had been good in theater in high school. So I went back to the theater department.
And so that was just kind of a default, and okay.
Yeah.
Got the degree, and then when did comedy come in?
Well, comedy did come in the theater department. Okay. Because there was a cabaret that we did, and the head of the theater department told me that I could, why don't you write a monologue, she said, for it. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think maybe the year before I had asked if I could write a monologue for this other cabaret, and she was like, she didn't like it. And then when I came to this one, she's like, let's have you write another one. And it was all puns on the ocean. And it was great. It stole the show every night.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I bet it did.
It was awesome.
So, and then I remember you telling me, and it was you made a venture into comedy and went out to Los Angeles too.
Oh God, yeah. That was like you mean the first time I went out to Los Angeles? Yeah. The first time I went out to Los Angeles was after I had gone to Texas, I had gone to New York, and I was back in Rhode Island, and I was doing a Joan Rivers impersonation. And the Joan Rivers contest was on across the entire country, and she had her late night show out in Los Angeles, and they were looking for a Joan for a day. and they were going to host her Tonight Show if they won the contest. And I won in Rhode Island, and they sent a busload of us out to Los Angeles, and 150 entrants from every state in the United States went out to be the winner and to be Joan for a day. And we all auditioned for like 3. Our audition spot was probably 3 jokes. And I was first runner-up on national TV. I did not win, but I was first runner-up. And I won this beautiful golden diamond necklace. And the winner was this other gal, Karen somebody. But it turned out that she was actually a relative or something. So it was a little bit fixed.
Right. But later you did host the Joan Rivers Show, didn't you?
No, and then later, so that was in 80. I left Rhode Island in 88, so that had to have been like 83, 84. And then in 1993, by then I'd moved to Chicago, and I was doing well in Chicago, and there was another Joan Rivers contest, and that one was America's Funniest Real Woman. And I won in Chicago. They flew us to New York, and I won that one on, national TV and became America's Funniest Real Woman, which really was another sort of bogus contest because they didn't accept people that lived in New York or California.
So it was everybody who was funny in America
except for people that are really trying to be funny in New York and California.
Well, small detail.
Okay, so Chicago was the second city,
right.
So I won out of Chicago.
Right. But somewhere along the line, you made a choice, or you fell into it like, I'm going to do this for a living. This is how I want to make money, and
that was right out of college. As soon as I was stealing the show every night in that cabaret, I said, "That's it. This is it. Easy." I thought, easy. Are you kidding me? This will be great. This will be easy.
I think that's one of the things about comedy is people think, I could do that. I'm kind of funny.
Yeah.
I tell jokes at work.
Yeah, this will be. You make money at this? Great, let's do it.
Right. There's a piece in Jerry Seinfeld's documentary where he's on stage and he's making fun of this, like, you all think you could be up here.
Yeah.
But you're not.
You're not. And it's not easy.
It is not easy at all. I mean, it's clearly, that's one thing I learned from you. It is all rehearsed.
Yeah.
But the really, really good ones make it look like they are just walking on stage and talking off the top of my head.
Right.
Yeah.
You make it look seamless and you practice it so much that then you forget. You can drop it, which for you, the 6 weeks is a very short time to get your act together. So that's why I said you did so well to get it written and then memorized, even though we had the notes up there. But just to have that flow, so that you can try and forget what you know. So when you go up there, then it comes out naturally because you already know it.
Right. Yeah. And to know it just that well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had it written down everywhere. I had audio recordings. I was listening
you
to
were
it,
great.
Walking in the woods, and I was a nervous wreck that day. And Lisa was trying to figure out I was trying to figure out why was I so anxious? And she was picking up on my anxiety. And then you get up on stage, and it's like.
Yeah, you did great.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's a blur,
Yeah.
I'm so glad I have the video recording of it to do that. So tell me a little bit, just a couple of things that you've done, because your bio says, names like Oprah Winfrey, Bill Maher, Rosie O'Donnell. You've been on these shows.
Yeah, I have. I was on Oprah, and as soon as I got to Chicago, I got on that show. I was like, wow, this is happening really fast. Mm-hmm. So I got on Oprah right away, and then Bill Maher, he used to come through the Funny Firm as a stand-up comic before he was on his show. So I used to open for him all the time in Chicago. And Rosie O'Donnell, I opened for her in Chicago, and then sent her a letter and said, she started her VH1 stand-up spotlight, and so I sent her a letter, and I'm like, I think I'm ready. And she's like, all right. And I sent her a tape, and she's like, come on out. So I got the whole treatment. I got the limo and the leather jacket and the 5-star hotel. It was awesome. And then I started doing her cruise. She was doing her cruises, so I started doing those, and Yeah, I've been.
So you've done a lot, and you're still obviously active. You're just in Baltimore, and
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just got back from Baltimore, going to Chicago, Wisconsin, doing a casino up there, and then Columbus, Ohio, the Funny Bone. So I'm involved with the Funny Bone chain. They like the show, the Queer Queens of Comedy, and so I can sort of write my own ticket now. Like if I need to fill a month, well, let's go to Baltimore. Let's go wherever they have 13 clubs all over the country. And they're actually acquiring more, and they're helping book some of the improvs all over the country. So it's a franchise that I'm developing and growing, but I actually need help. I actually need an intern, if you know anybody. I need help.
An intern, a comedy intern, or like a secretarial intern?
Both.
Both. And if they can do both. So if anybody's listening, we'll put Poppy's email at the end.
Exactly. Good.
If you're a funny secretary, you could be the ideal person.
Great.
The ideal person. So I wanted to talk a little bit about comedy. I still have this handout from the first day.
Nice.
And so there's a couple things I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
The first one is you have here, the very first line of this handout for the class. Comedy is a very subjective experience. What do you mean there? What are you talking about?
Well, I think that everybody who watches a show, and everyone who does the show, they hear it with their own ears, and it is spoken through your own eyes. So no matter how you put your joke, someone else is going to visualize it a different way. Everyone's going to visualize it with the characters that they create in their mind, how you're saying it, So we're all subjected to our own experiences. So I guess that's what I mean by it.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's this quote by this author, Anais Nin: "We don't see things as they are; we see things as we are."
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So everybody's filtering everything, and so you've got an audience of 25 or 160 or 500, and you might be saying one thing, but it's being interpreted 500 different ways.
Exactly. But your job as the comedian is to make everybody be able to get as close to how I'm seeing it as possible.
Yeah. And then the second thing you say, which is almost very much the opposite, in the next paragraph, the way I see it, comedy is formulaic. It's like math.
Yeah.
And then you have this, old school comedy is premise, setup, punchline.
Yeah.
What is that really what all comedy is? Is basically those three things?
Kinda, it is. I mean, otherwise, you can't get to a punchline without the premise and the setup, really. No matter what. I mean, even knock-knock jokes. Knock-knock. Who's there? I don't know. I don't know who. Well, neither do I. I don't know. But it's you just, I don't know. I don't think you can get to a punchline without the setup and the premise. So that's why it's like math. You got to have the other two in the equation to get the outcome.
Right, and it seems like you have to go through those steps and allow time for each of those to penetrate. I mean, I think a lot of people, just as you're in general conversation, they say, "Oh, I've got something that's pretty funny." Well, that's first mistake. Don't tell somebody it's funny because you're raising the bar too high.
Exactly.
But then they almost like go right to the punchline. And you have this joke that this old joke.
The bird.
That you have the bird.
Yeah.
Which is.
It's great. I say, when I was living out in Hollywood, and this is the setup is the premise is that all the girls in Hollywood, the women they starve themselves to look like supermodels, right? So they don't eat, so they're just starving, right? And so it's like, okay, well, and my neighbor, she lives right next door to me in my apartment complex. She was doing the same thing. She was starving herself too. I mean, she was so skinny, and it was because she eats like a bird. These people, she eats like a bird. She acts like a bird. I mean, every restaurant we'd go to, she'd slam right into the window.
which I remember reading that in class for the first time, and I was laughing.
Yeah.
So to break it apart is because I think this is really helpful for people who say, "Oh, I'm not very funny."
Yeah.
Part of it is, well, you don't know the formula,
Right.
And so you have here the premise: all the women in Hollywood starve themselves to look glamorous.
Right.
That's the premise.
The premise.
That's all we're talking about. Then my friend, who you have this name that's totally
Emma Shaw.
Oh my gosh. My friend Emma Shaw is one of those women. Oh my God, she eats like a bird and she acts like a bird. So then you're setting people up with the bird.
Yep.
Eating like a bird.
That's right.
And then the punchline is every restaurant we go to, she slams into the windows.
Right.
Right. Which is kind of then takes the whole thing and flips it around.
Right. Which is what the punchline's supposed to do.
And what's so fascinating is once you hear that premise, setup, punchline approach, if you watch or listen to any comedy or watch a comedy movie, it's all there again and again and again and again.
Yeah. I used to study the really old Jewish comics. When I first started, I had these little cassette tapes, and I would buy them and listen to them over and over. And you'd hear it, you'd hear how they set it up, premise, punch, boom, set up, boom, boom, and I was like, well, okay, well, this is how you do it.
Yeah. So a lot of pastors and preachers listen to this podcast. Well, why is including a joke or two or seven in a sermon or anybody that's any kind of a public speaker? Why is that valuable? What does that do to an audience?
You know what it does? I have found in my travels that it lightens people up. It opens people up so they can hear what you're saying. And that and food opens people up too. Like if you sit around and you're eating, now we're eating and talking, for some reason a bunch of these walls come down and now we're sharing and breaking bread or whatever, what Jesus was saying. There's some broken down walls when you're eating together. And it's the same thing with comedy. If you're laughing, if you can make somebody laugh, those walls break down. They just come right down. Yeah. And it's a wonderful tool to use to let people open their ears.
Yeah. And so you can be doing something very serious, but if you really want whatever that serious message might be, whether that's you're doing a business presentation or you're preaching, but if you can get people to kind of open up and relax and laugh.
Oh, that's it. Open up, relax. Yeah. And then all together as a group, there's a whole nother dynamic that goes on.
Oh, say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, I think as a group dynamic, if everyone's laughing together, that builds a community like that. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you're all one community of one mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we've all laughed at this same thing together. It kind of unites everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true. Yeah.
So humor's, I think I used it because I was a middle child and parents, horrendous, relationship, and I probably used humor to try and either get them together or fix myself. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's always said about comics is, they can be funny on stage, but they're miserable the rest of their lives. I mean,
that's a really big generalization.
Yeah, it is a very generalization. But is there something?
Well, there's tragedy for sure in my life, and I lost my sister when I was 19, and my parents were pretty bad. Family life, they weren't that together ever, and so there was probably that. And I said it, I'm in the program now, AA, and I said, I was sharing this the other day, and I thought, you know what, I kind of always look at the glass as half full, even though my glass has always been half empty. It's always been half empty, but I always say it's half full. And I think it's just a positive side of life to keep me sane or whatever. I mean, I want to be happy. I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to be depressed and sad about stuff. So.
Well, and if there's the choice, is it half empty or half full?
can go
I'd
either
rather
way.
choose half full,
Right,
because
right.
it is what it is, and you're gonna
exactly. You might as well look at it like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's not to deny that bad things don't happen or anything like that, but it's how you're going to respond to them.
Right. Right.
And I think that's really true. Well, I think comedy does that. I think that helps people maybe shift their perspective, maybe be a little bit more optimistic, or something like that. Yeah. So I imagine in all of your tours and shows, you've seen some pretty wacky things. Anything come to mind when I ask you about that? That's like, wow, this was the most bizarre thing.
I have a few of those, and they mostly were out of Chicago in those times, from '88 to '96, when I was really, really learning the trade and going on the road. And I'd go on the road by myself. And I would put some miles on my car and do one-nighters in different towns. And I was drinking. And I'd get, I'd find myself getting in trouble. But unbeknownst to me, I remember one night, like some guy was like trying to get in my hotel room, and come on out here, funny lady. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Right. And another time I was doing a show somewhere up in Racine, Wisconsin or someplace. And the booker was like, okay, well, if you can just last 15 minutes on stage, you'll be good. That'll be good enough, because I was scheduled to do 20. And he's like, but if you can just last 15, that would be good. I'm like, what? And it turns out this place was like heckler haven. Okay. And all they did was heckle the comedians to see if the comedians could handle it and to see if they could break the comedians. Oh, it was brutal. I mean, I felt like I was behind the chicken wire and they were throwing things. And, it was really bad. I lasted 15 minutes, and they still didn't pay me. So
that's even better. Yeah. As in terms of preaching, I've only had a heckler once during a sermon.
Oh, wow.
It was during a funeral.
Oh, wow.
And it was a part of the message where I was just saying basically some nice things about the deceased.
Yeah.
And, he was this and he was that and so forth. And in the back row, I hear somebody cough and sneeze at the same time and go, oh. And that was my heckler, and I did not respond. I just kind of kept going.
Yeah, bless you.
But bless you. I should have said that. That would have been good. So I haven't experienced too many hecklers, but that, oh my gosh. I mean, it's such a vulnerable experience to go out there and do comedy anyway. And then...
Bad. But, and then another time I remember again, up in the Racine area, I think I was doing a show, and it was right after the Gulf War. And I don't condone war. I didn't condone that one. Anyway, I started saying something, and these guys had just gotten back. And I started saying something bad, and they were like, oh, I'll kick your ass. I'm like, you really? Come on, or something. I don't know. And this guy came marching up like he was I'm like, really? You're going to hit a woman on stage? Oh, that was weird.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
So,
well, I guess Wisconsin can be tough.
Yeah, they can be.
You're going back there,
and
too.
I'm going back there this month.
Is it tough being a woman as a comedian? Is it harder?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely is. Yeah. It definitely, in the beginning, it was definitely a lot harder. And now, now I have my niche, sort of, so it's not hard in that respect anymore.
Well, when you started, there were not a lot of women comedians.
No.
Now there are more. That might help some, but I would still think it's just different.
It was hard. It was especially starting in Rhode Island, my God. Right. And Providence and the Guidos, and they were just harassing you, and and I wasn't really fitting into the tall hair and long fingernails kind of woman, and I was trying to create my own thing, and it was tough. Definitely some tough hecklers there, and I had to learn to take it and keep going.
Yep.
It was hard.
Wow, take it and keep going.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really tough. I think if anybody's listening and thinking of a career in comedy, we're successfully talking them out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it took me 6 years before I got paid.
6 years without getting paid. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
It was burning.
Yeah.
Do you still love it? Like it?
Yeah. I mean, it's turning into myself. My time is more spent promoting than it is writing. And because the promoting is the hardest part now to get the butts in the seats.
Yep.
And so like, oh, when am I going to write something? You know, I want to keep writing something new and stay fresh and, you know, pertinent and everything. And I found I was writing on stage in Baltimore. I was writing as I was doing it. I was like, oh, God, I threw this subject out of getting older and having less of a sex drive, and all of a sudden I was just off running with it, and it was great. It was coming out great. I didn't record it though. I don't take my own advice.
Didn't have your phone on stage.
No, I could have too. I always think I don't want to jinx it.
Let's talk about the class. So you teach this comedy class about what, 4 times a year, 5 times, 4?
It really, there's no rhyme or reason.
Okay.
So I'll say 3.
All right. And you've been doing that for a while?
Probably 2 or 3 years.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because I think I've had about nine classes,
All right.
9 groups.
What's it like teaching comedy?
It's interesting, you know. At first, it's, you know, when I first started doing it, I felt very flippant about it and very, I'll just do this, you know. And then when I see the intensity that the students have about doing it, it gives me a little more pause. And so then I realize how serious some of them are, and you and others really serious about it. And so, I mean, I don't really change. I think I've set it up in a good way, like the syllabuses and everything. So, I do take it seriously. I do.
You have a great way of doing 2 things at the same time, which is really hard to do, and that is, I'll just speak for myself. So I would bring something in, and you'd be very, very honest, which in the long run I'm really grateful for, because the last thing I wanted to do is to get up on stage and have it just go.
Right.
So you'd be brutally honest. No, that's not funny. I mean, I remember I had this idea of really, because I'm really tall, a short person coming up on stage and introducing me, and you were just like, no, that is a really bad idea.
Right.
But then I would go on with other things, and at some point, if I did have a line that was funny, you were all over, like praising, and that's great, and laughing yourself. And so you had this kind of whiplash experience going through the class of like being torn to pieces and built up at the same time. Wow. I told some friends of mine, I said, if I'd had a homiletics preaching professor like that in seminary, I either would have quit or I'd be the best preacher, you know, ever, because it's this great kind of push and pull.
Wow.
Do you think about that when you're critiquing people, or you just do it?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that as far as my theater degree and my background in theater, I've experienced some directors. And so I have had many directors, and I can pick and pull from how I responded with them, perhaps. Maybe I'm doing it naturally. Because I didn't like anybody that was too harsh, for sure.
Right.
You know, I didn't like, some people would just tear you down to build you up, kind of thing. And I'm not doing that.
No, it doesn't come across that way.
No, but I may be a little harsh sometimes.
I didn't experience it as harsh. I experienced it as honest. Now, some people could interpret that as harsh if they haven't experienced a lot of honesty in their life.
That's true.
But, you know, it clearly was always designed on, you know, you are interested in the students succeeding.
Outcome, yeah.
You know, you want success. So, so I just thought it was I thought it was great. I mean, I think you hit the balance.
It's interesting that a lot of students want to do kind of that, what you said, like bring out a short person, or let me wear this funky hat that's gonna, and it's always like, no, actually no, that's going to actually make you look amateurish. And so I only know that because I've done it. I used to wear a car. I had a car over my shoulders and I stood in the car. I mean, I've done it all already. So by taking the class, you sort of skip a lot of mistakes that it takes 6 years to make those mistakes before you know how to do it and come off looking very professional.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was pretty evident in the class. You know, periodically I had my own just corny, just like people, you know, some polite, my mother and my wife might laugh. Actually, my wife wouldn't. She'd just be like, no, that's just really stupid. She shouldn't do that. But, you know, but nobody else would. And you saved us from ourselves. You know,
right.
in many ways.
Which is, you know, in a way, it's not the best because everyone needs to make their own mistakes. And this class is like, you're jettisoned into not only having a perfect set, but a perfect audience, because the audiences are just phenomenal.
Right.
You're not going to get a heckler.
Yeah, no, not going to get a heckler. They're there because they're there to cheer you on.
Yeah.
These are your friends.
Yeah. It's not like in the real world. So you're kind of in a bubble taking the class and the show, but you do get a great tape out of it, and you do learn a lot, and you're ahead of the pack.
Yeah.
You're ahead of the pack.
Very good. And the other thing that I learned is, and I wrote down, edit. I mean, it is just, because it's even like phrasing. I can't remember what part, but it was somebody's piece, and you just moved a phrase from the middle to the end, and it was like, bang.
Yeah.
And it was just like that little 3-word shift.
Yes.
But to get there is just editing and refining.
It's wild how you don't see it. And you don't see it. And you don't know it unless you know it.
Yeah, unless you do it. Yeah. Well, I think it's a great experience. I think everybody should take the class.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope to do it. They have a couple of kids performing in I have a next show at the Pump House, May 11th, and it's going to be called Poppy and Friends, and I'm going to start doing it a little more often, and it's almost like an open mic of bringing students that want to come back and continue doing it, and have them come back and do it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. All right. If anybody is hearing this and they want to either book you for some comedy or take the class or get in touch with you, where should they go?
Well, my email is pophaha, so POPHAHA1, the number 1, at gmail.com. Okay. So there I am.
In touch with you.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for doing this.
Jim, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.